Hi, everyone, and I hope that you can hear me. Am I audible? So please drop a comment in the comment section if you can hear me right. Okay, so I assume that we are audible to everyone, and let's start the session. So, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to today's MBA Analytical session. I am Dipinti, an e-GMAT alumnus and an incoming MBA candidate at Dartmouth Tuck. And today, with us as my co host and the guest of this session is Shekhar Kumar, who is an alumnus of UNC Kenan-Flagler Business School, and he is also he's also secured a position in his dream company, Microsoft, where he's currently employed as a cloud solutions architect. Right. So, welcome to the session, Shekhar, and I hope that we have a great session today.
Thank you, Dipniti. Really glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So this is how we're going to structure the entire session. So first of all, because Shekhar is already an alumnus, we have a lot of ground to cover, and not just his MBA journey, but also recruitment and the life in a business school. So feel free to ask all your questions. Just drop in your questions in the comment section. You can start now, and we'll take them all at the end of the session. So primarily, we'll start with Shekhar's pre-MBA background because he had around 8 years of experience before he began his MBA journey, and so they were around in Nokia as R&D and then as a product manager. So we're going to cover all of that and what was his primary motivation to opt for an MBA. We're then going to cover his GMAT journey because Shekhar has scored a 770 on the GMAT, which is an amazing score. And so we're going to ask him about that. Post that, we'll come to his GMAT, the B school strategy shortlist post his GMAT. So basically, which all schools did he shortlist? What all schools did he apply to? What all did he get in? And finally, why did he zero in on his on the business school that he attended? Post that, we'll talk about his recruitment journey. So at Microsoft and how did he get the session? He also interned with Microsoft. So we're going to cover his internship as well as his recruitment, right? So I hope that sounds exciting. So start posting your questions as mentioned, and at the end of the sessions, once we have covered all the Q&A section, we'll take all the questions up, right? So Shekhar, let's start from the beginning.
Yep.
I think you started your business school journey in 2017. So,
Yep.
and before that, you had around 8 years of experience, as I mentioned, in Nokia as an R&D and then as a product manager, correct? So, if you could just tell us about your professional journey until then, and what was that one or maybe two factors that motivated you to opt for an MBA?
Absolutely. So, going back, rewinding a little bit, I did my undergrad, and I came out of my undergrad school from MIT Manipal in 2009. So that's when I started my journey as an R&D engineer at Nokia, and I continued on for next almost 8 years. And I started off as an R&D engineer, moved to different roles, did a little bit of project management and then product management, mostly on networking and security. I think more than the technical bit of it, what I realized through my 8 years, that I loved solving problems. I was fascinated by interesting and complex problems. I had an opportunity to go travel on behalf of Nokia. I spent time living in China for half a year, Finland for almost a year, and then Germany for a little bit. And all these experiences shaped this fact that I'm probably not tied to the technology itself, though I was working on very interesting stuff on 4G and 5G, but the complex set of problems where I can develop a little bit of empathy towards problem and think strategically on solving them. And that's where I saw I was creating value for my team. And then I realized that, okay, since I've been deep in technology, I have built these walls, right, where I'm really focusing on a certain set of technology and I wanted to broaden out. So to sum it up, my key motivation for doing an MBA to search for a broader, more complex, more interesting problems, which will have a global impact.
Okay, okay. Sounds interesting. And I could see that you were into a lot of verticals even before your MBA, though you were in the technology sector, but you did explore a lot of verticals in that, including, like you said, a little bit of project management, product management. Okay, amazing. So, I mean, then let's come to 2017, or I would say 2016, right? When you started, maybe when you started your GMAT journey, when you thought of doing an MBA, and the thought just started
Yeah.
accumulating in your head. So GMAT is the first step that usually we tackle in our application. So tell me about it. How did you strategize the journey, and where did you start from, and then you landed at a 770. So how was that entire journey? How did it
Yeah.
go?
So my journey started a little while back. So I by 3 or 4 years into my job, I really knew that I wanted to go out and do a master's. So I had started my GRE, and then I realized that I didn't want to do again a concentrated focus like an MS. So I pivoted in 2015, and then so in 2015 I wrote my first GMAT. So
Okay.
I don't know. So the first GMAT I wrote was in August, September of 2015, and I got a really poor score. I got a 600, which was slightly devastating. I've never had such a poor performance on a scale, and I realized that I had not prepped properly. I didn't have the right resources. And then I started doing a little bit of more research. I came across e-GMAT, I came across GMAT Club, and then I started strategizing in terms of how do I want to tackle GMAT. So it took me about 7 to 8 months. I started preparing again in January of 2016. I think I was doing online courses from e-GMAT. I was doing a lot of online testing. And I think a couple of things that really helped me was understanding myself, where I was making mistakes. Second, avoiding entropy. So by entropy, I mean whenever you're giving a test, right? So you're subjected to new circumstances, right? You're in a test prep center. You have a lot of people around you. This is something new. So I actually tried to get everything that I could very similar to the test. So I had the same pen, I had the same scratch pad, I had the same time to write the test. So I went in a lot of detail of me than the test itself. So I was meditating, I was exercising, and so on. So all that physical and mental health is super important when it comes to GMAT. Second, I think the structured and quantitative approach, right, of e-GMAT really helped me. So when you're logging in and you can see how you're tracking, that's a huge feedback loop which you don't get often in GMAT. So that helped a lot from e-GMAT's perspective. And then towards the end, I started seeing these key patterns in GMAT questions about what they are testing for. So they are testing you usually for your ability to interpret, so comprehend questions, your ability to double check your thought process so that you're not falling into a cognitive trap. And lastly, your ability to move on, right, in terms of time management, right? So make a decision and move on, because that's a very real world scenario. So once I got to these three things, I think then it was easy. I wasn't expecting a 770. I'm glad it happened. But I think that really the focusing on beyond the test itself and the key parameters that were driving the test and driving me were something that gave me immense boost in terms of score.
Okay, so just getting my facts straight. So you took the GMAT two times. Is that right?
Yeah.
And the first time you scored 600, and the second time it was a 770.
Yes.
That is an enormous. It's an elevation almost, right? The graph is just it's amazing. So I
Yeah.
think that's a huge morale booster, because I have seen people who are stuck in 600, 620s in their attempts. And usually it's a very progressive kind of thing that happens, right? With people, they take about 2 to 3 takes, and then they gradually progress to the 99th percentile. But then, as you can see, this is a real example of someone who has gotten from 600 to 770. So it's very much possible.
Yep.
Uh,
And Rimzi, just to add on to
yes.
that, I think one
Hmm.
of the key aspects of that was,
Hmm.
I mean, through e-GMAT and then other courses, I was really enjoying e-GMAT, GMAT journey itself, right? I was really enjoying it. I still remember my RC passages. I could not get, wait to get back and, try a new thing that day. And that's a very different than, doing a test for, the first time I did, I was doing a test for the sake of test for getting to the next journey. The second time I did e-GMAT or GMAT exam, I was actually learning a lot in general, right? Regardless of the score itself, I learned a lot about cognitive ability, critical thinking, ability to manage time, and so on. So it was a great journey for me personally, coming out of GMAT.
Amazing. Awesome. So now that you went straight from 600 to 770, which was, I would say, a huge achievement. So now came the time to strategize your applications and decide which schools you are going to apply to, right? So how did you plan that? And, what factors played the most important role when you made a short list of the business schools that you wanted to apply to?
Yep. So I think, I mean, just like GMAT, I was not super informed about what to do with these things. So I know a lot more in hindsight than I knew back then. But then one of the key things that I wanted to get out of MBA is to get to know people. And I have realized that I keep saying this in my personal quote that people are schools. I have learned more from mentors, friends, and people than in the classroom. So I wanted to get to a school which was located in kind of a smaller setup, small town where if you just said I'm going to a bar, people knew which bar. And I think so. A couple of schools that stood out there were Duke, Tuck, and UNC. All three of these are kind of set up in a small town kind of location. Other two schools I applied to were Booth and Michigan Ross. Ross was primarily because their tech placements are really good. And Booth was kind of a dream just because it gave you a lot of flexibility into molding your coursework. So I wasn't aiming for a single bucket for all five of my schools. I was trying to aim for different buckets. So I think in the end, I got an admit from UNC, and then I got waitlisted by Tuck and Duke, which came through really late in April, May. By then, I had already decided with UNC.
Okay. So the major factors, if I can just quickly summarize it, it was your goals. Of course, you wanted to go into tech, which we will come to later as you
Mhm.
explore the recruiting season. And also, you wanted kind of like a remote MBA experience. Is that right? An immersive MBA experience.
Yeah, I mean, kind of a smaller,
Hmm.
setup where you have walls
Hmm.
to rebound back to people. So you go to parties, you see the same people over and over again. You go to school, you see the same people, and that really has come to fruition. In my case, I've developed a lot of great bonds and friendship in my MBA journey, which I think was one of the great outcomes of my business school journey.
Okay, okay. Now, having say you now you applied to a handful of schools, about 5 to 6 business schools, right? And so you said that you were waitlisted at Fuqua and Tuck, right? But then you had already gotten the admission from Kenan-Flagler. So, were there any other reasons also behind choosing Kenan over the other schools?
I think one of the key reasons was I was getting a huge scholarship.
Okay.
Um,
How much was it?
so that was 75%.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so I think that was close to 96,000 dollars, something like that. So that was a great burden off coming because I really wanted to graduate coming off that debt free. So that was a huge factor. And then the other factor was again the timing of it, right? So um, I got my UNC admit in Jan Feb, and others were late. And by the time I had already gotten to know folks at UNC, and I decided that okay, I have a fair shot of where I wanted to be with UNC, and with the scholarship money, it'll be a huge boosting factor.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, definitely makes sense. I mean, 75% of scholarship, it takes a huge burden
Yeah.
off. Okay. So yeah, now that you mentioned the number that is 75%, I think that's a huge amount from the entire tuition that's entirely laid off of you. So let's talk about of course, was it a merit-based scholarship? I think it was a merit-based scholarship, right? Okay. So let's talk about what were some of the important factors that you think in your application that played a key role in helping you achieve the scholarship.
Yep. So let me try to address it in a different way. So let's try to address it by saying that, why business schools actually give away scholarships? And I think I'm saying this more on hindsight, being part of the whole journey and in 2 years and seeing people come through and seeing who got scholarship, who didn't, and so on. So the key factor is that the admission committee is trying to make an awesome class, right? They're trying to get best of the best, and that best of the best factor, it's nuanced, right? So different people bring in different value. So you get scholarship based on the value that you essentially create for that particular classroom, and that reflection is more towards what are you bringing to the table, right? So a couple of things that I thought I brought to the table was, first, okay, high GMAT score. That's definitely helpful. Just because all the rankings that B schools do, they have average GMAT scores and so on. So there is a desirability on this part of the business school to get a higher GMAT. I mean, that's just plain fact. Other couple of things that helped me stand out probably was I had a couple of patents that I did part of the Nokia journey. So those kind of stood out as something that you know I was kind of the only person who had a patent in my class. So that was helpful. And last was I had a lot of international experience. So I had lived in 4 different countries, worked there. So I was bringing a lot of international experience to the tables. So I think I tried to highlight these factors, and kind of mask other factors that were not so much for me, like Indian IT engineer background, which is not super unique in GMAT aspirants. So again, key focus for me in summary was trying to highlight what I was bringing to the table for the B school.
Okay. So you mentioned a very interesting point here, and I would like to address that. You mentioned about your international experience, correct? Now, for you, you said that you had lived and you had worked abroad, correct? But do you also think that international experience can also be portrayed if a person hasn't worked or hasn't lived abroad? Can it also be portrayed in the application?
Absolutely. I think when you start writing your application, it's a blank canvas, and you get a lot of freedom in terms of expressing and marketing yourself as why you're a good fit, what you're bringing to the table. It doesn't have to be your physical presence. It The only portrayal is, did you learn from it? Have you inculcated some of the values or some of the cultural experiences that you have? Because once I was in business school, there was a lot of focus on getting people to understand cultural dimensions of doing business across international borders, right? So now everything is global. So and that's where probably it might have resonated with the adcom having that experience. But if you have worked with your international counterparts, if you have worked for companies which are global, and you deal with people both directly and indirectly, definitely try to highlight that.
Absolutely. I completely agree with this point. Just to cite a personal example, even I didn't have any international, I never lived there. I never went there. I didn't get the opportunity to visit any international countries during my professional career. But yes, other thing was I worked with a Swedish team completely. So from India, I was a sole contributing member, and the entire team was from Sweden. So I tried to highlight all of that, and I think it was in Darden that they even asked me a question around it.
Yep.
That what are some of the key cultural differences that you can highlight between the Swedish and the Indians? So, I mean, as Shekhar said, it's just a blank canvas, and how you portray your application, it's completely upon you.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Amazing. So, right now, you are at, yes. So, before we come to your MBA journey that you started with Kenan-Flagler, let's talk about one of the essay questions that, Kenan has. And I would say that it's a very interesting essay question. So, it's like, as the business world continues to evolve, circumstances may change and guide you in a different
Yeah.
direction. Which other opportunities would you like to pursue? But what I think the question is trying to ask here is basically if you have a backup plan for your
Yeah.
MBA. So, do you think that this was an important question? And basically, how did you approach it?
Absolutely. And let me give you a little background into this question. But before that, a quick pointer that I forgot from the admission and SAPs, I think it'll be really helpful. What I did not right, or I wish I would have done, was networking at business schools, having somebody who knew my name, either on AdCom, apart from the application itself. So any opportunity to network that you get from current student AdCom, that's gold. So I think I wanted to kind of highlight that because it's something that I didn't do, and I think if I would have, I would have even better results. So coming to this particular question here, right? So when I went to business school, there's a recruiting cycle, right? So first is your investment and Wall Street. Second is consulting, and then tech. It's just that timeline that happens. And usually, a lot of people, when they get to business school, they have a certain idea of what they want to do, and a lot of it that is investment banking or consulting. Right? So
Consulting.
those are top tier. Somehow, and not everything works out in business schools, right? I mean, specifically if you're an international student, you have more guardrails to work with, right? So what happens in Feb March time frame, if your primary plan doesn't work out for whatsoever reason, people feel very disappointed. The key reason schools ask, or Kenan-Flagler asks this question, is to make sure that you understand that life is not simple, that you go and say you want to do this and you end up with that, right? So you might have to pivot, and they want you to think about it, right? And they want you to be ready to pivot if time and situation comes that way. So I think for in this question, I would suggest that people be truthful, right? So when I wrote it, I said, okay, I want to do consulting. And then if it doesn't work out, I would be happy to go and find a role in tech. And to be honest, Nidhi, worlds have merged. Traditional consulting and traditional tech are no longer, these separate verticals that we think about. I interned in tech, but I did a strategy role in tech. So you could find your sweet spot. Um, what you should highlight with these questions is that you have thought deeply about your strengths and how you could be fit for multiple different roles, because that's what's going to happen, right? So come recruiting, you're going to pitch yourself to consulting companies in January, tech in Feb, startup in March, right? And what they want to see, somebody who knows this, so their expectations are set correctly, so that they are not disappointed when they are in business school. So they're not trying to filter you, they're just trying to make sure that you understand the ground realities of the whole process of finding a career post MBA.
Okay. So coming to this question, so you mentioned that you wrote that your primary goal is consulting, and so what did you write the other opportunities? So did you write? Did you specifically say tech was the other opportunity that you would explore? Was it
Yes.
something around that? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And again, I mean, this is triple pivot, right? So when you're changing your role, location, and the industry, that's hard, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I think right now we're just going to take a pause because we have a question in the audience from the audience panel that which is along the similar lines. So, Shekhar, you talked about networking a couple of minutes ago. So Neelav has a question that you stressed a lot upon networking. So how does this networking really help you? If you could just get into some details on that.
Okay. It's fairly, I mean, and it took me a while to understand this coming out of India. And I primarily worked with European firms, which are not so heavy in networking. US is completely opposite. It's very heavy on networking. So how does it help? It helps when, the adcom sits down and they're flipping through applications. And if your name stands out, or if somebody knows you in terms of apart from your application itself, if you have had a couple of conversations, right? If you have talked about what you stand for, what are your goals, why you're interested in the school, and so on, because at the end, it's both parties are trying to create a symbiosis, right? So I think it's a great tool to market yourself, right, and have an advocate which is closer to the decision making people. And there are a lot of student ambassadors who who can actually write up. So I have written recommendations for people coming in after having a conversation. So that holds a value if a current student writes a recommendation for you. Not an official recommendation that you should get from your peers and bosses, but an unofficial one, just a letter to ADCOM. That goes a long way in saying that, okay, this person has reached out, this person is interested, and there is a person who is thriving in the system advocating for the candidates. So that's where networking helps in recruitment. Sorry, in getting through that admission process. I think when we come to recruitment, I'll also talk about networking in recruitment.
Yes, I think that that's also very important. We can come to that when we talk about your recruiting cycle. That networking will go a long way. I think even someone told me that even when you are in the firm, like when you said, let's say you have joined a consulting firm, even at that point, you will have to network in order to get great projects and just to land yourself in good
Yeah.
opportunities.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I think there's a lot of stigma towards the word networking. It sounds very superficial in general, and that was my mindset coming in. I wish I didn't have that, so I want to. I would love to clarify that. I think it's not superficial. In terms, it's about communication. It's very hard for people to judge who you are based on a single sheet of paper, which is resume, with a lot of numbers and figures, or an essay which is heavily edited. People understand that, right? People look at that day in and day out, and that doesn't communicate your personality, who you are, right? And that's where I think that networking bit, where you have a personal touch, that's more of a communication. Other ways to network, if you are not, is LinkedIn is a great way to network, and you don't have to do an active networking there. So one of the strategies that I tell people to do a lot is add people you think are influential, and keep posting about stuff, right? Keep posting about stuff that you are passionate about, that your where your goals are. And by the virtue of LinkedIn feed, you are actually networking, you are communicating who you are.
Right. Amazing answer. So yes, we are going to come to the deeper ends when we touch upon recruiting. So let's move ahead. Right. So we recently covered this essay question that I think yeah, Shekhar answered really well. Let's move on to your journey at Kenan-Flagler. You told me that so in your essays you wrote consulting, but then let's talk about once you went to Kenan. I mean, how did the recruiting cycle transpire, right? So did you recruit for consulting firms or did you recruit also for tech firms? I know that you landed up with an internship with Microsoft, and you worked with a huge it was a game product of Microsoft, correct? So if you could just give us brief details till your internship journey.
Yep, absolutely. So I started with consulting. A couple of reasons, right? So one, I was curious about it. I had not done consulting. I've heard good things about it. I had known, what it is about. It's very coveted when it comes to business school. So I started with that recruitment, and I think one of the good part about consulting is when it comes to business schools, they have a very set paths or set of hoops that you can jump through as an individual. So whether it's doing cases, whether it's doing your behavioral stories, so all that happens pretty early in the process. So let's say October, November time frame, where you have to network, when you have to come up with your stories, when you have to be able to um, do cases and so on. So for me, it was more of an exploration. That was my mindset coming into, I mean, whether I wrote consulting or not in my essay, my key mindset was to actually go and explore, see what options are there. So I was not tied to, or I didn't have a heart. So I gave a shot to consulting. I think I interviewed for Deloitte. I didn't get through that. But in the process, I think I learned a lot. I think it was a great way of prepping myself for tech interviews that came in later in Jan-Feb timeframe. So all the work I had done for my consulting prep was really, really helpful. And then I think by Feb and Jan, so I didn't get a direct call from Microsoft, but I had a friend at Microsoft who had put a good word for me to the recruiter. So I had an initial interview. It was very funny. So I had an initial interview, and I wanted to do more of a program management side, because at that point of time I was like, okay, I want to get into Microsoft and see what the ecosystem is about, and you can always make a lot of parallel movements there. And at that point of time, I think those roles were not available. So I moved on, and then I had a couple of more offers from a mid-sized startup and a nonprofit coming into March, which is kind of late for recruiting. So then I saw a post coming out on Microsoft websites. I actually reached out to the recruiter and I said, hey, dot, 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 we talked earlier and you said you didn't have roles. I see these roles. Can I, interview? And then he said that, okay, that's a mistake, but I do have this other role, which is in gaming. So that's part of Minecraft. Minecraft is a game which now Microsoft owns. It's the most sold game on the planet. So huge scales. And believe it or not, I had not heard of Minecraft when I first was asked to interview. So I kind of ramped up on that. So I flew to Redmond, did my interviews. I think Microsoft interviews were very, very good compared to everything else I had done. They're very conversational. They wanted to know what I did, what I thought about things. So I had about 4 rounds of interviews, and then I got an offer a week later.
Amazing. So yeah, that's how you landed up at Microsoft with your internship, right?
Yes.
Now, you talked a little bit about your having interviewed with Deloitte for consulting, right? And I also know that you won a case competition that was for
Yep.
Deloitte. Was it organized by Deloitte?
Yes. Yes. So
Okay.
it's a very
Okay.
fun competition that happens at,
Hmm.
I think, 10 or 20 schools.
Hmm.
And so what happens is that in the night at 8 o'clock, so these consultants come, they give you a case at 8 in the night, and you work entire night with your team. So you're
Wow.
locked in a room. You have a lot of caffeine. So and you have to submit your deck and your research by 5 in the morning, 5 a.m. And then you freshen up, and from 7:30 your presentation start. So if you get selected, you go and so we had a one-on-one with Duke that we did. So we won at UNC, and we won with UNC versus Duke, and then we got a chance to represent our college in the final presentation that happens in Deloitte's campus in Dallas.
Okay, that's amazing. So was it during the first year or during your
Yes,
second
that was
year?
the first year. That's, I think, October of first year.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah.
I mean, just a few months into business school, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, I think it's a
Hmm.
great bonding experience, good problem solving, and they give you actual real cases. So
Okay, okay, that's great. Okay, so let's move over. Now, you finished your internship at Microsoft, and then, even your full time position is also at Microsoft. So, approaching the recruitment season, like after your MBA or maybe when you near graduation. So, but then the kind of role that you currently do at Microsoft, like you are a cloud solutions architect, that's entirely different from what you did during your internship days, right? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your current position and how it is that it is radically different from what you did during your internship.
Yeah. So again, as I was pointing out, I think roles in consulting and tech have merged a lot. So the internship project I did was strategy, and I was developing subscription product for Minecraft, and which actually launched last year, so which is pretty cool. But as I was going through that journey, a couple of things that I realized was I was not very comfortable with. One is empathy towards gamers. I'm not a huge gamer myself. I'm a very laid back gamer, and I'm not super passionate about it. So that was always something that I felt a lack, because when you go into a gaming world, it's niche world, right? People are really really passionate about gaming. So I think that was something that was kind of bothering me a little bit. Second piece was I wasn't bringing all the experience I had into the play, right? So had worked for a decent periods of time, and I wasn't able to use that. So while I enjoyed doing that project, I thought it's a very steep curve for me, and I wouldn't enjoy or create the impact if I was in a role where I was bringing in both the problem side solving side of it and the experience I had. So I talked to my manager there, and then I was kind of recruiting and non-recruiting, because Microsoft is super helpful. So they told me, tell me where you want to go. These are the roles which are open. Let me know which one you would want to interview for. So I interviewed for, and this role is in sales, and I interviewed for that, and I got through. And in this role, I think the parts I love is, earlier I was in engineering. Now I'm super close to the customer, right, every day, and I help them implement, and technologies which are on the cutting edge of the spectrum, right? So I work with artificial intelligence, I work with machine learning, I work with advanced analytics, and I see business value coming out of that technology every day. Why somebody buys some and artificial intelligence product. So there's a lot of buzzwords, but when it comes to real implementation and driving business value in a business, that's a really good vantage point for me. So that's where I think I really started enjoying this role.
Okay, okay, that's great, and I think that completely justifies the point that you shifted, and it's great that you tried something in your internship, you did it really well,
Yep.
but then you decided that that was really not your forte or not your passion to kind of explore it further, right? Right. Okay. So I think that's awesome. And just towards the end, so I'm going to ask you about. I mean, what are your long-term plans after this? Currently, you are in this role. So how do you see yourself, say, progressing? So do you continue? Do you plan to continue staying on tech? Do you want to venture into entrepreneurship? Because usually people have like long-term entrepreneurial goals. So what is it that you see yourself for?
I think currently I have pretty short-term goals, and then that would kind of inform my long-term goals. I think my short-term goal right now is to get a gist of the spectrum of technology that I talked about, both in AI, machine learning, and advanced analytics. And currently, what I'm doing is absorbing a lot. So once I actually got into the role, I had to study more than I had to study during my business school years. So there's a lot of learning that happens every day at my job that I really, really enjoy. And I think after I inculcate that knowledge, I'll probably want to run a business's, AI or ML or um, advanced analytics pipeline or the whole division, right? So that's one way. But then I'm not a person who is bound to a lot of long-term goals. I usually try to see short-term goals and get to a vantage point where I can see a little more and then pivot.
Okay. Yeah, sounds perfect. All right. So I think we gained a lot of insights into your entire journey to Microsoft. You covered the recruiting season, which I think is very important for future applicants also. Right. So I think let's move on to audience questions. So did you use any admissions consultant? Is Krishna's question.
I tried to use one. I didn't find them very helpful.
Okay.
I thought if I had actually reached out to current and
Hmm.
alums of schools that I was targeting, I would have had more information to write on my essays. I think the only probably good value coming out of admission consultant was a little bit of language and grammar and nothing more than that.
Okay. Okay. And also, Neelab has a question about your verbal score. So I think we already added in the comments that you improved your verbal score from 32 to 45, right? So if you could share some insights on that, what exactly is something that helped you in verbal, specifically in verbal.
Yep. So, I mean, I think there's three sections. Each of them have different techniques. What underlyingly I really enjoyed was actually getting loving the content, reading. So I like reading, and so once I started things like RC or critical reasoning, the content I was reading, I was very immersed. So I was trying to understand the meaning of what is happening, and what they are trying to say, and why it would have a different alternate path or so on. So in all three sections, what really helped me was trying to understand the meaning of the subject matter that was given to me, whether it comes. And then I actually figured out a lot of things. Like, for example, when you're doing RC, right, and you are given a passage about African American jazz culture, things you have never heard about, right? So what I would do is I would read first couple of sentences and then try to locate couple of words that are more related. Like, for example, jazz. Where have I heard jazz? Where I have heard, and then when I have those visual images in my head, that relaxes your brain into absorbing more information about the paragraph. If you don't have that an alien paragraph, what it does, it looks very intimidating. You're reading the same sentence over and over again, and then your brain is actually not working optimally to derive information out of that. So I did a lot of visual elements in my head to make my brain comfortable with the subject matter that was not very familiar to me.
Okay. Great. Thanks for the answer. So let's take up. So there's one question that's actually been heating up in the comment section. I think 2 to 3 people have asked this question. So let's take up one of them because all of them are in the same lines. So the question is that you had a 770. So why didn't you apply to M7? And there are a lot of questions around this, that why didn't you apply to Stanford or other schools? So, but he did apply to an M7 school. He applied to Chicago Booth, is if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep.
Okay. And even like, before Shekhar pitches in with his point, I would also like to mention that, having a 760, I also targeted Darden, Duke, Tuck, and, a handful of other Ross and other schools. So it's usually, it's not the only the GMAT score that matters. It's also the kind of environment that you look yourself to be in. So for me, it was very important that I explore an immersive MBA culture, like Shekhar also mentioned. So TAC was actually one of the perfect fits that I was having, including Fuqua, because it has such a close knit community. Ross and Darden, they are great consulting schools. So I would say that it's not just the GMAT score, not just having a high GMAT score that plays the pivotal role in applying to schools. So you can apply to a bunch of schools, but then there's no strategy in that. You just end up losing a lot of time just because someone has a 717, you apply to MIT. So personally for me, MIT and Stanford would never have worked out. I knew that because they look for different things in the application, and I think you need to strategize that well.
Yep, absolutely. I completely agree with you, definitely. Um, I think for me, very honest answer is you need to pick your battles. Um, when I did my second time, when I wrote my, so that was September when I got my score, right? So that's super close to, and by then I was like deeply immersed in my GMAT. I was not really doing a prep for applications. So I kind of played safe there a little bit, just because, again, addressing the fact that I had a ton of experience coming in. And what I wanted to do is go forward with my journey that particular year. So I did not want to compromise there. And that's why I was targeting schools which were like, at a shooting distance. And I think a little bit there, I think it's probably something to address about, doing MBA when you have experience on the higher side. Um, I think there's no issues there. The perfect time is probably between, when you have 3 to 5, 6 years of experience. After that, there's no disadvantage as such that I felt. But I mean, coming out of the business school, you're almost all at the same levels, and you cannot, have that +2 or +3 that you had before add up to the next role. I mean, it's possible. I've seen people do that, but it's rare.
That's a valid point. Great. So I think that was all. I think that was all the questions that we have, the primary questions, and we have kind of addressed them all. So before we end the session, I'm just going to ask you, Shekhar, if there's any tip or anything that you would like to share, either with applicants or with people like me who have already secured an admit and are going into business school. So yeah, it can be generic admission tips, application tips, or any tip that you would like to share with the audience.
I think a couple of things. First, connect with people who have been on that journey. Most people have seen hard times. They're very willing to help. That what I've felt, that this business school, this bucket of people, they're very, very helpful. So I've made a lot of great friends, mentors through that journey, both who have helped me and not helped me, but have been great inspirations. So definitely reach out, connect to people, try to learn from their experiences. I've seen a lot. There are a couple of cases where people had an opportunity to see this unfold for a year and then get into that role, and they did a tremendously better job than somebody coming in. So that's a great source of knowledge. Tap into that. Second is, don't be afraid to network. I think I'm just talking personally for myself. It didn't come to me naturally. But then over time, I realized the importance, and it's a positive thing all across.
Amazing. The networking thing, yes, we covered it in detail, and I think I completely support that because I currently I am going into the school, but then even I feel that at this point of time I do need to network. So yes, it's very important. Okay, so let's end the session. And okay, so before we end the session, I would just like to share the webinars that we have for e-GMAT in the near future, so that you can give me a second. You can register and you can get yourself prepared for that. So first of all, I think we have, I hope my screen is visible. Yeah. So we have Shamir's webinar with us. That's a part of the MBA Analytical session, and that's day after tomorrow. So Shamir is an MIM alumnus from London Business School. So that's a different track altogether. So all the MIM aspirants, you can join the session, and we will be pasting links to all of these sessions in the comment section. So if you want to register, just head on to the comment section and click on the link and register so that you don't forget. This is day after tomorrow, and we have a couple of GMAT webinars coming up. So the GMAT sentence correction webinar, that is on Saturday, 24th April. And then we have the number properties concepts, that is on Sunday, that is on 25th April. So all of these will be added to the comment section, and make sure that you register if you are interested to attend. Amazing. So with this, we close the session. It was a great session, Shekhar. We covered a lot of grounds, and thank you so much for joining us today.
No worries. Pleasure's mine.
Thank you all. Thank you all for tuning in. Bye.
Bye-bye.